The throne room of the Zephyrian flagship fell silent as Queen Zaldera's voice echoed through the crystalline chambers. Her 6 eyes blazed with an intensity that made even her own guards step back. Before her stood Oscar Chen, a human engineer who had been working on diplomatic repairs for the past 6 months, and beside him, trembling yet defiant, stood Princess Daisy, the Queen's youngest daughter. "Mother, please," Daisy began, her bioluminescent skin flickering with anxiety. Silence. The Queen's massive form rose from her throne, her forearms spreading wide in a gesture of barely contained fury. "I ask the human, speak, Oscar Chen of Earth. By what deception did you ensnare my daughter?" Oscar stood his ground, though his heart hammered against his ribs. 6 months ago, he never would have imagined this scenario. He had arrived on the Zephyrian vessel as part of the Terran diplomatic corps, assigned to repair their quantum drives after a catastrophic malfunction had left them stranded near Earth's solar system. "Your Majesty," Oscar said, keeping his voice steady, "there was no deception. Daisy and I," Princess Daisy, the Queen corrected sharply. "Princess Daisy and I grew close while I worked on the repairs. We shared knowledge, stories, and eventually," he glanced at Daisy, whose 3-fingered hand subtly reached for his. "Eventually, something more." The Queen's mandibles clicked in agitation, a sound that reverberated through the chamber like thunder. "Humans are primitive, short-lived. You barely possess interstellar capability. My daughter is royalty of a civilization that has conquered 1,000 worlds across 10,000 cycles. What could you possibly offer her?" This was the moment Oscar had prepared for, though he had hoped it would never come. He had known the cultural chasm between humanity and the Zephyrians was vast. Their species had evolved in the crushing gravity of a Earth, developing strength and resilience that made them formidable warriors. They measured relationships in ceremonies of combat and displays of genetic superiority. But Oscar had learned something during his months aboard the flagship. "Your Majesty, may I tell you how we met?" Oscar asked. The Queen's eyes narrowed, but she gestured for him to continue. "The quantum drive failure wasn't just a mechanical problem. The cascade had corrupted the ship's environmental systems. Your engineers couldn't fix it because they were following the schematics perfectly, but the schematics were wrong. They had been updated 3 generations ago without field testing." Daisy spoke up, her voice gaining strength. "I was in Section 7 when the oxygen processors failed. The emergency systems locked down. I had 17 minutes of air left." Oscar continued. "Your engineer said it would take 2 hours to override the locks manually. I looked at the problem differently. Humans are good at improvisation, we've had to be. We spent most of our history fixing things we barely understood, making do with limited resources. You bypassed the security protocols," the Queen said, her tone unreadable. "I did more than that. I convinced the ship's AI that I was maintenance drone by exploiting a linguistic quirk in your programming language. Once inside, I rerouted power from non-essential systems and forced the doors open in 11 minutes. He saved my life," Daisy said quietly, "and he didn't ask for anything in return." The Queen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. "Many warriors have saved my daughter's lives in battle. That does not make them worthy of bonding." "You're right," Oscar agreed, surprising everyone in the room. "Saving someone's life doesn't automatically create a bond, but what happened after that's what matters." He looked at Daisy, and she nodded encouragingly. "After the crisis, Daisy came to thank me. She asked about Earth, about humans. I told her about our struggles, our wars, our failures. I didn't try to impress her with tales of glory. I was honest about our flaws, and you found this appealing." The Queen asked her daughter incredulously. "I found it refreshing," Daisy replied. "Every suitor you've presented speaks only of conquest and strength." Oscar spoke of perseverance despite weakness. He told me how humanity nearly destroyed itself a dozen times but chose to survive instead. How they reached for the stars not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up. "Our species may be young, Your Majesty," Oscar said, "but we've learned something valuable in our short existence. Strength isn't just about physical power or technological superiority. It's about adapting, learning, and growing. It's about facing impossible odds and finding a way forward anyway." The Queen descended from her throne, her massive form towering over Oscar. Up close, he could see the scars of countless battles on her carapace, the weight of centuries of leadership in her eyes. "You speak boldly for one so small," she said. "He speaks truthfully," Daisy interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Oscar. "Mother, I know this breaks tradition. I know you wanted me to bond with a Zephyrian warrior prince. But Oscar has shown me that there are different kinds of strength. He's brilliant, resourceful, and kind. He's seen me not as a prize to be won, but as a person to be known. The queen studied them both for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she let out a sound that might have been a sigh. The Zephyrian Empire has stood for millennia on the strength of tradition, she said slowly, but we have also survived by recognizing when adaptation is necessary. She fixed her gaze on Oscar. Human, you will submit to the trial of worthiness. You will prove yourself not through combat, but through the skills you claim. You will solve 3 impossible problems of my choosing. Fail, and you will leave this ship and never speak to my daughter again. Oscar's throat went dry, but he nodded. I accept, Your Majesty. And if he succeeds? Daisy asked. The queen's mandibles twitched in what might have been the Zephyrian equivalent of a smile. Then perhaps this old empire can learn something from young humanity after all. As Oscar and Daisy left the throne room, their hands finally, properly intertwined, neither noticed the queen's guards exchanging knowing glances. They had seen that look in their queen's eyes before, the look of someone who had just found exactly the kind of challenge she respected. After all, any warrior could swing a blade, but it took something special to stand unarmed before a queen and defend love itself. The end.